Greetings, salutations, and all good things in between. What's up, everyone? Matt here. Happy fall. Got some more fall time Cinewoop stuff going on here. I have a secondary channel that I kind of was doing stuff with some drone stuff like this. I haven't done anything for years, but that's what all of this is from. I'll put a link in the chat later on, and you can go check it out if you want. Anyways, thanks for joining me on this wonderful Friday. I hope you had a good week and a lot of stuff done. You know, Halloween's coming up. Hope you're, got a lot of good plans going for that. Remember, stay safe, do all that good stuff. So, this week, what are we doing? Well, on Tuesday, I dropped new sample app, the quote-unquote universal app. It's the inspection, questionnaire, checklist, what have you, whatnot. That came out on Tuesday. I have a link in the description. Get your copy of it now. I'm going to go over your questions and comments that I've been getting. A lot of good stuff, a lot of good questions this week. Of course, we're going to do the weekly rundown. And then for the deep dive, I'm going to dive into the inspection app. That's why I'm saying go get your copy now. I'm going to go over how various parts of that work, since I didn't put out build videos on this because there's a lot of really complicated things going on. So if you want to know how an individual thing works, an action, a view, a slice, automation, whatever, let me know in the chat, in the comments, and I'll go over it. All right, everybody, that's what I got for my intro. Let's get to the show. Yeah, the inspection app. Yes, this is something that I'm kind of calling a universal app in many respects. I say it's universal because you can basically configure what the app is collecting inside the app. I've had many discussions with people over how to do something like this, and a whole bunch of people have done it. The app that I've released is actually the evolution of several apps of this nature that I've made that were much grander in scale. The original idea for this idea was I had a client that is a researcher at Columbia University, and they needed a way to build questionnaires. They were doing a research study, and they had all these different tests and questionnaires and things that needed to be done. They needed a way where they could do all of that stuff on the fly, where if they needed to add a question into the mix, they could just get it in there. They needed to change skip logic. So if you answer this, skip all of these things and go somewhere else. I didn't include that in this app. I have intentions of doing that. Future advancements. But anyways, I digress. So this app is out now. There is a link down in the description. Get your copy of it now. I will be going over in depth how this thing is put together, how a whole bunch of these virtual columns down here work, what they're doing, what some of these actions are doing. You let me know what you want me to dive into, and I'll dive into it. But that's enough of that. We had some pretty good questions this week. Let's get to some of those. Alright, so the first thing that I want to go over here is not so much a question, it was more a suggestion of a way of accomplishing something that somebody else came up with when I was working with them. So I was working with, let me make sure I say his name right. Where's that? Oh man, I didn't write it down. Christian de Ramos, there it is. Christian de Ramos. Wanted to get the last name right. Hey Christian, what's up, buddy? So we were working on an app together, and we were struggling with that the new thing that shows up inside I'm going to try and show you what this looks like inside inside this. So, okay, you can't see it here. We were struggling with, I don't have anything put together the right way to show you this thing as I'm doing it now. Yeah, see, all of this is built in such a way that it works. none of it has any of the difficulty that we were running into. Well, there you go. Happy days. The app you got doesn't have this difficulty. The difficulty we were having was we were inside a reference and we had that pesky little new option, right? And try as we might, you can't really get rid of that thing in any intuitive, normal way you would think. You have to go some roundabout ways. The current method that's mostly documented in the community is to create a slice of the original table. So for instance, I'm on a project assignment record. It has a reference to the project. And let's say I don't want to give people the ability to add a new project when they're inside that project assignment form, right? So when they go to that drop down for the reference of what project this assignment belongs to, there's that new thing. The only way to get rid of that is like make a slice. In the slice, don't let the slice have the add permission. That makes it go away. Christian came up with a really clever little workaround. The thing to do is, okay, instead of just including the one column for your reference, right? Include that, but also include another column. And this column is an enum base type reference. Okay, the key here is that if you take the formula to give you the list of options that you're trying to do for whatever this reference is, and you put that inside the valid if space for the enum base type reference, and you turn off the allow adds toggle, they can't add any new options. That reference, that new thing, goes away. So and then you don't have to do any kind of trickery about like, oh, I'll take this value and look it up in the other table, or do a multi-layered and statement inside of a select where it's like, okay, take this value and look it up in the place, but also only match the parent so that you don't have to do any of that because the enum column is a base type reference. And so all you got to do is take the value that they select there and drop it in the reference column. And now you have your hard reference connection. So it's a really good way to get a hard reference connection while removing the ability for somebody to add a new reference into the mix, without having to create a slice, which brings with it its own host of ancillary problems inside the AppSheet platform. You may have run into those here and there. So like, this is a really good way to do that. I'm going to make a dedicated little video on how to do this. I just wanted to throw that out at the very beginning here. Thanks, Christian. You're the man. The first question I'm going to go over here is from Jared Maziz, and it is about the how to create a nested PDF for your template. It says, hi, Matt. So I'm working on this now, but it occurred to me that if I want to keep my app up to date, I need to use AppSheet to copy the types of work to the new table, which I was going to do through automation and a data action by copying over the new types. But how do I account for changes to the name of the item or the deletion of an item? In other words, how do I keep the new table up to date so that there are the exact same types of work in both tables? All right, so what we're talking about here is, so I've got one table that is the grouping of categories, right? And then I've got another table where these are the individual bits of data. And in this table, I've got a column that specifies what category it belongs to. Okay, the problem you might be running into there is perhaps, okay, so if we just back up, if you make the category column in your detail side, if you make that a reference to the category table, okay, the value that you'll see inside AppSheet will be the masking of the reference. The value that is stored inside inside the child's reference will be the ID of the parent, right? So if I set my ID to unique ID, so it's just a bunch of gibberish, inside the sheet, I'm going to see a bunch of gibberish, but inside of AppSheet, I'll see whatever I specified as the label for that. You know, I got like a name column, right? So what you're looking for here is what happens if I change the name of the category? how do I get the sheet to show the same name? Okay, the thing to do here is don't copy the name from the category into the child records. This kind of falls along the lines of like data normalization rules. Like one of the rules is you don't want to copy a piece of data from one place to another. If you can just connect the two, that's the way to do it. And that's what this is all about, the references. If I make the column for the category in my child table a reference to the categories table, then it's the ID that's stored over here, right? And it's the masking that I visibly see inside the app. So masking could be a column that somebody could change left and right and time again, and it'll seem like it's changing inside the app, right? Keeping things up to date, quote unquote. The key here is just don't copy the value over to here. When you need to use whatever value it is that you've copied over here for whatever it is that you're doing over here, maybe you're printing something, right? You're printing notification, right? Okay, at that point, you use a dereference to go through your category to get the name to whatever you specified as the label for the thing. You just use a dereference to say, all right, cool, go get it now. That's how you would do that. And in that way, everything's up to date all the time, with the caveat of your data source will be holding the ID value of the category and not the name value. So if you're relying on the spreadsheets for a lot of your functionality still, meaning when I need to know some piece of data, I go to my spreadsheets to find that. If you're still doing that, this is going to be a problem because the value you see in the cell is going to be the ID, right? Really, you should try and retrain your brain to where when you're trying to find the value, instead of going to the sheet or the source, you go to your app and find it in there. And if it's hard to find in your app, well, this is a prime opportunity for you to play with your, expand your AppSheet skills and add a view into your app for you, the developer, that makes it easy for you to get to the thing so you can see what you need to see. And maybe that's a temporary view. You just put it in there so you can do what you need and then delete it. But anyways, that's the way that you do a lot of these sorts of things like this. It's all through references. And then when you need to use the value, you dereference that, whatever the value is over in the original, wherever the source is. Hope it helps. Let me know if that just steered you in the wrong direction. The next one is from Chandra Leem, and it's about the quick update system. And this specific video that I put out is about how to update the parent from making some sort of change in the child. So like a backwards update. I do something here, change the value on the parent. That's the specifics of the video that she's asking about. The question she has is, very helpful tutorial, but how to update the child record from the parent using the same method. I'm kind of losing track. Yeah, okay. So this is actually a lot easier than you're thinking. So for the method that I showed inside the video, what we were doing is we were going from the child and updating the parent. Okay? So there's that action that you have to do that's the ref update. It's one of those actions that says run an action on a set of rows, right? So that thing, you have to specify what rows you want to update, right? Okay, so in this video, I'm on the child table and I need to update the parent. So inside the field where I specify what records I need to update, that's where I've got this formula that you have inside that I've got the square box around over here that says list order detail order link. Because what's that saying is I'm on the child record and there's a column here that holds the ID of the parent record because that's the reference to the thing. And so I take that and I wrap it in a list because the field in particular has to have the list. You just can't feed it one value. So we take the one value, make it a list, so it's a list of one value, and now it works. AppSheet's specific about types in certain places. Okay, so because I'm on the child, updating the parent, the list of records that I'm updating is a list of the child's parent. Okay, if we're going the other way, if I'm on the parent and I need to update the children, this is where this can be a lot easier. So if I just dive inside here to, this is the inspection app. So I've got the catalog, which is a parent, and I have catalog items, which is a child. So if I'm on the catalog and I want to update the child records to whatever catalog item I'm currently like looking at inside the app, okay, that list of records that you need to update is really simple. It's just, if you come down here and you find the list of child records, that column right there is the list of the child records. So for the list of records that you need to update, all you do is drop that column. Just put that in square brackets, done. That gives you the action where I'm on the parent and I say, run the quick update action on all of my child records. That's how you do it. You could probably find, let me see if I have it in here in the, yeah, here we go. So actually, if you go and get this inspection app, you'll see I actually have a ref update all catalog items already in here. So here's the catalog items, has an update action on itself, which is just the regular standard quick update thing, update +1, oop, done. And then the ref update for all of the catalogs. So it lives on the parent. It's executing an action on a set of rows for the child records where the rows are related the related child records. And the thing to do is run the update. There you go. Oh, I like it when I have stuff that's directly linked to the thing that I need to talk about. Hope it helps. Let me know. The next question I'm going to go over is from Water Seal Transport. It says, I have one question. AppSheet is free for a long time. I mean, if I'm using it only for personal uses, testing an app or personal things, right? So if I'll upload data, it'll be free in the future, or will they change some policies? Because I have learned so many things from your videos. Now I created some apps for my study or work purposes. So this free policy will change in the future or not. Okay, so AppSheet has always been free for personal apps. Meaning, it's just you. I think the limit last time I looked was like 5 unique users that you could have on a free account for an app that's marked as personal use. I really don't think that would go away. In fact, when Google bought AppSheet, we all kind of expected that there would be, we kind of hoped that it would be like, all right, it's free now. Here you go, have fun. Because at Google, they don't usually charge for a lot of anything. Like Google Maps is free, and that's an amazing thing that you can do over there. Sheets is free. Drive, it's free to a degree, right? There's a free tier. So I expect a free tier to always be there. And where, the limits that are put on that will probably fluctuate, but I imagine there will always be a free tier. And it's really just, there's a toggle you turn on inside the app settings. It says this is a personal app. And then you don't share it with people because it's a personal thing, right? But as soon as you start using something for for work, you should probably start thinking about paying for a license. You know what I mean? Especially if it's this is something that I did for work and it's actually helping us solve our problems and we're starting to rely on it. If you're relying on it, you know what I mean? What you're paying for is the ongoing support to keep the app stable, your app stable, so that it works on all the Android versions, all the iOS versions. Whenever they come out with something new, you don't have to go in there and be like, oh, I've got to go recompile my app because there's a new iOS. You don't have to do that. It just works. That's what you're paying for. So I imagine the free tier will always be there. I would certainly hope, right? Next one comes from Willie Goncalves. Wow, I can't talk. Goncalves, sorry. Concaves. Terrible with last names. Willie says, it's about my action looping video, the one where I came up with an order of operations where if you follow the order, it makes creating your loop actually rather easy. There's a few key things you got to do, and there's a few key elements you got to get right at the very front, at the very start, but as long as you get those right, you're good to go all the way around. His question is, hi Matt, thanks a lot for your content. In terms of efficiency, would you pick this method instead of the remaining product list you teach in other videos? You could use the count to change your index of the list items and stop it when it reaches the total amount of items in the list. You're right, you could do this, but in reality, there's actually a whole bunch of different scenarios in which you need to use looping, but they're different in execution. In this video in particular, the implementation that I was doing was I simply needed to create X number of records. It didn't matter what the records were. Like, it didn't matter what the, like, if I had a list of colors, red, blue, green, it didn't matter what the color was. I just needed to say, cool, create 3 records over there and we're good to go. So for that instance where it didn't matter what the things were that I was creating, this is the method that I presented here, because that's what I was working on at the time. The count thing and like the number and then the doing the count, that wasn't the focus of the video. I probably should have pointed that out. The focus of the video was the order of operations of how to create your action loop, right? Because it can get really messy and confusing in what you need to do. And so I just, after a while, I eventually settled on, there's this 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. And if I do it that way, it actually kind of smooths a whole bunch of stuff out. The thing is, the order is, first you have to make the make action, right? Create the action that does the thing that you need it to do, right? So it's making the record in whatever table, right? So you make that first. And then the key is make sure that you get the formula for the condition that tells it when to stop. As long as you get that correct. So in the instance of this video, it was where the count of the child records is less than the count of how many I said to have. I said 5, we have 4, keep going, right? In a different way you would do that, if I needed the record that I was creating to be specific, as in I have a list of colors and I need to make sure I'm creating records for red, blue, and green. Not a yellow, not a something else, not a white, you know what I mean? So in that case, in that implementation, what I would do is I would have a list where you select what you need to do. And then in that one, that's where you would use the remaining thing that you need to do. You could use count to accomplish that, but if you could, it would work, right? It would totally work. But doing it with the remaining thing, what you're really doing there is I'm saying, here's my list of items and here's my list of things that have been created. And you're literally taking the items out of the list. So, but what's in the list, what's left is what's actually left. The other way you would be doing it is there could be some messiness and there's some wiggle room in there. Do you kind of see where I'm going with this? It's like, well, what happens if a record suddenly shows up in the middle of that while it's going? Then the second thing is no longer the second thing in the list. It's something else. And now my count's all off and things are all kind of weird. Like, you have the possibility for weird things like that to kind of creep in, edge cases where you'd never think it would pop in and suddenly doing this weird thing. This is why. So that's why in those instances, I stick to, I've got a list and let's just subtract the items out of it so that it's like one for one what's going on. I'm actually in the process of putting together a list of scenarios for all of the different ways that you use looping. So if you have a scenario that is really complex or you think is really unique in what needs to go down in order to make it happen, please let me know in the comments below. I will put it on the list and add it to that video. The next one, and I think this is the last comment for this section, comes from, I tried to look up how to say this name, and I had a lot of conflicting results. So, Geed? If you tell me how to pronounce it, I'd appreciate it. He says, for the enhanced dashboard sample app, the question is, hello, Matt. How do you set the value of the dashboard hour sum based on the selected filter? I actually went over this in another live stream somewhere. I couldn't find the timestamp for it. I didn't have a whole lot of time to look for it, but I did go over this. The problem that you run into when you're trying to create a sum inside my enhanced dashboard based on whatever's currently shown inside the dashboard. The problem that you run into there is a matter of lag. And what I mean by that is I'm in my enhanced dashboard control box and I boop, 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 make my changes. The dashboard goes like it's live. It corresponds when I make the change. It makes the change. It does the thing. It does the thing. The problem, though, is that if I have a sum that I've put maybe on that user record that's inside my control box, the value inside that lags behind the actual thing. That value relies on like the final sync to go down, because it's like I make a change, that's one sync. I make another change, that's another sync. And then when those go away, then there's one more that happens after that. I usually call it like a background sync. Like that last one that's going on is the system getting all the information from the cloud and integrating it into the system. And so part of that is getting all the formulas to update, which makes that sum update in your dashboard. But you see the problem there. I'm like, douche. And then it's like, yep, waiting for all these things to go away. Hey, there we go. We got our result. Finally showed up. It doesn't make a really good workflow. You know what I mean? It doesn't make for a good work experience, if you will. It's difficult to get this sort of thing to kind of work the way that you want. There's some hacks that you can do. For instance, if inside your dashboard, you're displaying things in a table or a deck, you can add grouping to that. And with the grouping, you can have a sum on the grouping. I think that's live and it updates like that. You could have a chart, right? You could make a chart that gives you some sort of graphical representation of this sum with like a total inside it or something, the value total inside it. That would be live dynamic. But there's really no good way to make this work. You might be able to create, if you use like quickchart.io and created your own image, if you had like an SVG that you wanted to make, some kind of chart type image that you wanted to make that was dynamic, that might work, maybe. But I'm thinking you'd still run into the problem of you'd have to wait for that final sync to come around. Anyways, yeah, there's a lot of workarounds to trying to get some sort of sum to work with your enhanced dashboard. The thing that I've really kind of settled on for things of this nature is if you need that sort of analysis type of thing to be done, create a report table instead. Instead of just doing the enhanced dashboard, create an actual reports table. And I've got a sample app that shows how to do that. It's part of the evolution series. We've got 2 things inside it already. We've got another one planned, a few of them planned. But that allows you to kind of do the same thing that the enhanced dashboard does, where I can like put in some criteria. I want this client in this project and these dates and only the things that are unbilled. And it gives you all of that, but inside a specific record, right? And in the record, you can do this. You can do a sum of everything that you need, and it's live updated like that. But yeah, you know what I mean? So that's what it is. Thanks for the questions, everybody. If you have comments, if you have trouble doing something or whatever, drop a comment in one of my YouTube videos, and I'll go over it eventually. All right, let's move on to the next section, AppSheet News. All right, not a whole lot going on with AppSheet News, but some. The first thing I'll talk about is, this is probably just the biggest thing of note this time, is that the primary view positions, so on the bottom navigation thing, I had like leftmost, left, center. They renamed all of those. Instead of leftmost and left, since the new desktop experience shows the bottom navigation bar vertically like this over here on the side, left and right doesn't really make much sense in that instance. So they've changed them to first, next, middle, later, and last. Interesting choice of terms. Later and last. Interesting. Yeah. Anyways, other than that, the only other thing that I'll throw out there is, if you're using the new desktop experience, you may be aware that that's preview and it's like beta, like alpha beta. There's stuff in there that's like core things still don't work. They're working on them. They're slowly getting more of them implemented. Some of them that have been implemented are like some context sort of things that didn't work. Now they're starting to get them out. Scrolling problems, some things just didn't kind of work out. They fixed those. There's a lot of button problems that existed. They just didn't work in some instances. They're smoothing those out, along with some various UX problems going from one place to another, what something looks like in this instance versus another. They're smoothing things out, but that's about it. Not a whole lot on that front. Let's move on to the deep dive. All right, so the inspection app, right? Okay, so if you haven't gotten your copy of it, there is a link down in the description. Get it, open it. I'm going to go on some deep dives right now about how some of the bits and pieces of this thing work. Now, I didn't put out a video of how to make this. It was really, it's a long story. It was originally intended for somebody, and then things didn't work out the right way, and then it just kind of sat somewhere for a while. And then a couple of weeks ago, I was looking at it going, man, I should put this out for everybody. I should make a new evolution series for this. So I did. But so that's why I didn't do a video on how I built this thing, because it was built for a person, and like I was working when I did it, so you know what I mean? Anyways, all right, what am I gonna go in? So the inspection app, right? There's so much good stuff going on inside here, and I've really left a lot of this very basic intentionally so that we can move in a whole bunch of different directions with this app, and I'm really curious to know where you guys want it to go. So what am I going to go over? I have a list here. So I don't know if I'm going to cover all of these things, but I'm certainly going to make a good stab at it. So the first thing that I want to talk about is, how does the remaining items work? So this app is an inspection checklist questionnaire maker, basically, right? The idea is, it doesn't matter what you need to collect data for. You can just put the records inside here. Doesn't matter what the data is that you need to collect. You just put the data in here, and then you just collect the data, right? Okay, so part of that then is, when I'm in the middle of doing something, when I'm in the middle of doing like when I say I'm going to start doing checklist number 1. Okay, well, when I'm doing that, clearly the system needs to have some way of keeping track of what have I done and what have I not done, right? So there's some trickiness involved to making this work. I went one direction with this, versus another. And I'm going to talk about why. So when I'm setting something up like this, what I'm really talking about is I have a blueprint table. I've got one table that's the blueprint, and like these are the things that I need to do. And then I have the other one, which is like my target, and I need this is where I'm collecting those things. Okay. So how can I get all of these into my current whatever I'm doing, right? I need to be able to see, if I've got 5 things that I need to do, I need to be able to see the 5 things over here. Okay, there's 2 ways you could go about this. I could take all of these and just create the records over here, and then the person can go through the records one by one and modify what's there. That's one way to do it. Another way that you could do it is I could take these records and present them over here so that you can tap on the thing that you need to do, and then that one goes away, versus creating everything and then modifying all the records. Myself, I prefer that second version where I take whatever's over here and I just display it for you, and then you can tap on this and then we'll create the record on this side. I prefer that method. I'm always looking for the least number of terms, the least number of computations, steps, like least number of terms in all aspects that I can. And so that includes this. So if I was to copy the records over, right? What's happening in that scenario is there's one interaction inside the system for each of the records. I created the records. And then the user has to go through and modify each and every record. So that's 2 operations for the one thing that I'm trying to do. So in some instances, it's nice to be able to just copy everything over. But I generally have found that for most instances, usually somebody needs to individually address every single item that has to be done. Meaning, like, they're not going to skip something in the middle. And if they are, it's part of what's happening and it's considered part of the flow. But like, if there's 5 questions, they're going to do all 5 questions. Like, they have to answer all 5. They're going to do something for all of them every time. So might as well just get the interaction at the moment when they're doing it. So that's how I built it. There are times, however, where maybe like the defaults that I'm copying over here, maybe the defaults are exactly what those things need to be. And all I need to do is like modify this one, modify that one, and we're done. In that case, I would copy them over, right? But in this instance, I'm showing you the implementation of, I'm going to display what needs to be done, allowing a user to click on the record that then creates the corresponding target or whatever side of creates a corresponding data collection record for whatever we just clicked on. Okay, so how does the system have this list of remaining things? So if I just show you, if I come over here and I say, I want to start this contact thing for George. So how did I get this list over here of remaining items? Okay, if we go and we look at the table that this corresponds to, you can see that this is the inspections. It's a slice based on the current user in progress inspection. I'll go over this later. If we go to the inspections and we go all the way down to the bottom, we can find we have this remaining items virtual column. So if we go in here and we look at the formula for this, what is this doing? So there's a few things in here. The first thing that it's doing is it's saying, okay, this item, or I'm sorry, this inspection has a catalog link that it belongs to. And as a reminder, catalog is the name of the blueprint side of the system for the inspections or the checklists or the questionnaires. It's the master list of categories and items that need to be collected. I called it catalog for a generic word. So this inspection has a catalog that I've selected. On that catalog, I have a list of main items. So this first thing grabs that list of items. I'll go look at that later. The other next, it adds into this second thing here, it adds to the list from the related inspection items. So these are the child records from the inspection that I'm doing, the ones that have already been created. Grab for me whatever value is inside inspection item next item. Now I'll go into what this is later on, but just to give you a summary, if there's a follow-up item for the question that you just answered, this is all of the follow-up items. So the idea is, first do the red line, give me all the master items for this catalog that this person is doing, add to that any follow-up items that this person may have encountered. And then the last item down here is this pink one. It says subtract from the system, from the related inspection items, the catalog item. So that is the column that is the reference that specifies for this item, I'm collecting that item over there. Like I need to know what's the tire pressure. This column specifies the reference saying I'm collecting the tire pressure. So what we do, first the red thing, we get the master list. Then the blue thing, we get any follow-up items. We add those together. And then we subtract from that any of the items that we have already selected or that we've already collected. And the result of this is everything that still needs to be done, right? Because I have a master list minus everything that we've done. And I'm adding into that any kind of follow-up items that need to be done as well. So that's how I can get this sort of remaining items thing to show up. If I show you a little further here, so remaining items, so this is the inspection. And the inspection, if I come up here, has this reference to the catalog, right? So this is where I'm able to go through this doorway to the catalog that I selected, and I can get the list of catalog items from over there. So if we go and we look at the catalog, we go to the very bottom, we can see we have this list down here of related catalog items. And so literally all I'm doing is I'm pulling that column right there, because that column is the list of the items. Okay, I'm not pulling that one. I'm pulling the main items. So what is this main items? Okay, let's go over that then. Okay, so in the catalog, I have a list of this master list of child records. But you can see that I've hidden this. And I've got these other ones down here that I'm showing for real. Okay, so this is the related inspections. You can ignore that. This is the catalog follow-up items. All right, so I've given you the ability inside this system to specify if a data point that you need to collect needs to follow something else, such as, is the tire pressure okay? If they say no, I want to know why. But if they say yes, the why thing doesn't matter. We can skip over that. It's not necessary, right? So the follow-up item is conditional based on some primary item that somebody's done. Obviously, I need to separate these items out because I can't just show them the list of everything, because the list of everything is going to include all the follow-up stuff that's, conditional, and it's not the main things. So I need to take the list of everything and remove from that any of the follow-up stuff. Okay, so that means I've got to have a list of all of the follow-up stuff. If I go to slices and we look at catalog items here, you can see I've got follow-up items, because literally inside the catalog item records themselves, there's a field that you can specify that the item that I'm building, like the reason why the tire pressure is not okay, like that item follows whatever I selected here. So if there's something inside this field, that means that the record I created is a follow-up item. Okay, so what I do is I grab all of those follow-up items and I hold them in a slice. So then if I go back to my catalog and I come down here, I then take that slice of just the follow-up items and I create what I call a data subset. Okay, what is this? So I've got a slice that's filtering the list of the records. Okay. Then I come back to the parent for that record and I create another ref rows. But instead of using the original, like this original list right here, where it's using the catalog item table, the root table, instead I create another ref rows where I change and I use the follow-up table instead. Literally the exact same formula. So this list right here is the master list. If I go in the formula, it says ref rows, catalog items, that's the name of the table, and that's the link. All I've done is I've changed this first part to the name of the slice. So if I come down here and we go to this catalog follow-up items, and we go to the formula, we have its ref rows of the follow-up items. This first part for the ref rows, this is the name of the data source that you want to get records from. AppSheet treats slices just like a table, just like a regular data source, so that you can freely interchange the name of a table with the name of a slice, as long as the slice is the same table. So this column creates a list of all of the related catalog items that are follow-up items. So I've got my list of master items, my list of catalog items, and then you know exactly what's happening down here. So then I say, take my list of catalog items and subtract from that the list of follow-up items, and that gives me my list of main primary items. So this is my list of everything all the main questions that need to be answered. That's what this column gives me. And so when I'm on my inspection and I need to know what are the questions that need to be answered, this column holds the list of everything that needs to be answered in the first place. So now if I go back to my inspection and we go down and we look at the remaining items, so this makes a little more sense now. So I'm saying, go to the inspection catalog and give me the main items. Then add to it these follow-up items, because that's what this next item thing is it's the follow-ups. And then we subtract from it whatever we did, and it works. All right. The next thing I'm going to touch on is the follow-up items, right? How does that work? So inside this sample app here, I've given you the ability to specify that a data point follows something else. How does that work? So if I go in my app here, and I go to the catalog, and I go to any one of these, and I go to my list of items down here, right? And let's just say I want to add something into the mix here. So I'm going to add a new item, and I'm going to give this, new item. We're going to say this is a data type of, an enum, and I'm going to say, like a yes and a no, whatever, good enough. Okay, so now I saved this the first time. I built the system to allow you to get the primary details of whatever it is that you're doing out really fast. Meaning there's more settings inside the inspection items that are visible after you save it the first time. The reason being, when you're going through the first time, for me, usually when I'm making these items, it's usually I want to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I want to get them out. After I get the list of everything done, then I can go back in and be like, all right, for this one, I want to restrict it this way. This one needs to be a follow-up. This one needs to do the whatever. Do you know what I mean? So I built the system in such a way that when you first drop into the form for creating a new item, you can see up here at the top, there's a few other pages. There's this identity page, there's a setup page, and then there's an analytics page. But you'll notice the setup and analytics aren't visible. Only the ident is. That's because what I've done is I only want you to identify the item that you're doing the first time you create it. Right? I want to know what's the title. Like, what's the question? What's the thing visible to the users? What type of data is it? Maybe you have a description, and that's it. Maybe and an image. That's it. After you get everything out, then you come back and you can modify your records, and now these other pages are visible. The analytics will do themselves with an automation, but the setup is where you can come and you can do all kinds of crazy stuff with it. You can include how-to information. You can do the required if. You can allow an alternative answer. Can they skip things? So I'm talking about the follow-up items, right? So that's this required if. So what I do here is I say this item comes after something else. And that's actually, I've already set something up like this in this particular inspection thing that I did, is the reason why the tires are not up to pressure. So if I actually just cancel this and delete this item, and we just go and look at this inspection. So you'll see I've got my main items. That's that list that I'm pulling inside the inspection. That's this thing. But then I also have all of my follow-up items down here. Okay, so if I go to the follow-up item and we go inside its setup, you can see I've specified for the required if that this item, the item of why isn't the tire pressure okay, comes after the yes/no question of is the tire pressure okay? And then should this item always be required no matter what the previous item's value? No, it's based on the value, and the triggering value is no. So when somebody is answering this question, if they answer the value no, then this item, the one that I'm working on right here, which is the reason why the tire pressure wasn't okay, that item becomes required. Okay, so it's marked as a follow-up. So that follow-up item, this is the tire pressure okay? Why is it not okay? Okay, that is held inside this slice over here for all of the follow-up items. Now, we go inside. Now we get into we're going to go and dive into the inspection items table. And if we look at the inspection items, and you scroll into the middle of the columns down here, you'll come down right around the ID. Just above it, you'll find a column that says next item. So this is the thing that's telling the system, what do we need to do next? So if I come in here and we go to the initial value, you can see there's a lot going on here. Okay. There's a lot going on here. Yeah. But it's actually kind of simple in what's going on. It just seems like there's a lot, but there's really not. It's actually kind of deceptively simple. Okay. If we look up at the top, you'll notice first off, there's this little separation right here. Okay. That's important. Keep that in mind. So, this first thing up here is what happens first. So the first thing that it checks is it checks to see, does the catalog item that we're doing, does it have a follow-up? Like in this item, did you specify that this item is supposed to have a follow-up? Okay, if there's not, so if it is blank, right? If it's blank, then all I want you to do is I want you to go to the inspections remaining items, remove from that list this item, the one that I'm doing right now, because I'm doing it right now. So it's technically not remaining. I'm doing it, right? So give me all the remaining stuff minus what I'm doing right now and give me the first thing out of that. So that's what happens if there is not a follow-up. If there isn't a follow-up, just go and give me what's the next thing. Good to go, right? Okay, now, if there is a follow-up, that's where we get into all of this craziness down here. So if we look at this, okay, so you can see there's obviously an if statement that starts this and then a whole bunch of stuff. So let's go through this thing bit by bit. Okay, so first thing that we're starting is, it would actually be better if I go this way. Yeah. So the first thing that we're starting is an and statement, right? So I'm saying and then I've got this not in something. So what am I saying? So it's an in statement, and I'm looking to see, is the inspection item's follow-up item, so because each item has this knowledge of I've got a follow-up for me, so they know what the item is that needs to follow it, if there is one. So we take that value, whatever this thing's follow-up is, and we look to see, is that value inside my inspections collected items? I'm trying to see, did they already answer the follow-up? So the and statement that we're in is saying, is the follow-up item not inside the inspection collected items? Okay, so if that's true, then that means we haven't collected the thing yet. We still need to collect it. Okay, all right. So there is a follow-up and we haven't collected it yet. Okay, moving on. Remember, we're in an and statement, so that's just the first thing of the and. All right, now we move into an or statement. So we're saying, is the catalog item's follow-up item always required? Is it required, like when this thing is required, is it equal to always? If that's true, rock it. Good to go. Make it work. Oops. Right? And then if that's okay, so sorry, got a little distracted over there. So is the follow-up always required? If that's true, that's good to go. So now we're in an or statement, right? So either it's always required, or, and now we're dropping into another and statement, or it's based on a value. The requirement of the follow-up is based on a value, and then we go to drop into a switch statement based on the data type of the item. So if the item is a number, we need to check and see, either is the number that the person entered less than the follow-up item's number under this triggers required. So this column is holding a number that says this is the low value threshold. If something's lower than that, we need to do something. We have a corresponding number that says this is the high threshold, where if the number that, where the number that the person enters, if that number is above this threshold, we need to do something. So I've got these two numbers that say if it's below or if it's above. So if the thing we're doing is a number, and either the number that the person entered is less than the triggering number, or the number they'd entered is greater than the triggering number. Okay, that's if the thing that we're doing, the data point we're collecting, is a number, right? Okay, if it's not a number, if we're doing a photo, then we've got to look somewhere else. We can't look at the number field anymore because the number field has nothing to do with the photo field. So we've got to switch. That's why we have a switch statement. So if we're a photo, the item will be required. The next item, the follow-up, will be required if the follow-up item's required if photo upload equals true, and there is not blank the photo. Meaning, for the item, the follow-up item, I've said the follow-up item is a photo, and it's required for you to put a photo in the thing, and you haven't done the photo thing yet. If that's true, then we need to do the follow-up. That's for the photo. If we're not a photo and we're not a number, right? Again, I'm talking about the follow-up item's data type. So if that's not a number and it's not a photo, then we fall back to this in statement where we say, okay, is the final output, and just to give you what that is, I've got all these different fields to collect a text. I've got enum, I've got a number, I've got an enum list, I've got a date, I've got a time, I've got all of these different fields that have the different modalities for entering that different data type. what I've done is I've created a single column called final output that, based on whatever type of data you're entering, it just copies that into the one column. Point being, I now have a single point of reference for this is the answer that the person gave. If the answer was a number, the number's in here. If they typed in a paragraph, the paragraph's in here. If they uploaded a photo, I put a little thing in here that says they uploaded a photo. So the whole idea is I have a single place that I can look, this final output, for whatever the answer the person gave, that's the answer. So what I'm doing is I'm checking to see if the item that we're doing is not a number, and it's not a photo, it's something else. It's a text, it's a date, it's a time, it's a whatever. So then what I want to do is I want to see, is the answer that the person gave inside the follow-up items triggering required values? That's that enum list where I've selected what value can the person enter into this field that makes this thing required, such as for the question, why isn't the tire pressure okay? That is required if the previous answer's value is the tire pressure okay. If you answer no to that, then this follow-up is required. Okay, so this in statement here is doing that sort of checking where it's saying, okay, this person has selected the value no, and that value is held inside the final output. Is that value inside the follow-up items triggering values? In this instance, for the tire pressure thing, yes. And the final answer output is the word no, and inside the triggering required list for the follow-up item is the word no. No is in no. There we go. Yes, it is. Okay. If any of these things are true, so if we go all the way back, so then if we look at our closing parentheses, this closing parenthesis closes the switch. This closing parenthesis closes this and, which is the thing based on a value. And keep stay with me here. This closing parenthesis closes this or statement where this part is saying based on the value that the person is it always required or based on the value? So that's what the or statement is doing. And then this last one down here is the first and statement that I started at the very beginning, where I'm saying, have we collected this item yet or no? No, we haven't. Okay. Is it always required or is it based on a value? And then based on the value, whatever this thing does, whatever it needs to do so that we check and make sure stuff's what it's supposed to be. If all of that is true, then that means there is a follow-up item. We haven't collected it yet. It's either always required or it's based on a value and you did the value that makes this thing required. In other words, you need to do the follow-up item. In this instance, now we go down here and we follow to the bottom of this and statement. In that instance, if all of that is true, then go to the catalog item and grab its follow-up item and hold that value in this column. What is this column again? This column is, this column is the inspection next item. This is the thing that's holding, based on whatever the person has entered for the current inspection item that they're doing, based on whatever they answered, what do we need to do next? Are we doing just the next thing? Or did we check a whole bunch of stuff and now we need to do the follow-up? So if we do need to do the follow-up, that's what all that huge if statement is doing. If we do need to do that, then go to the catalog item and grab its next item. Okay. Otherwise, because we're inside an if statement, if we go back up here, we started an if statement right here. So this branch, this whole thing from here all the way down to here, That is all of the criteria for that first branch of the if statement. This thing down here where I'm saying this is the true part of the if statement. So all of that stuff up above is just checking to see, is there a follow-up thing? Do we still need to do it? And do we actually need to do it? If we do, we grab that. Otherwise, there is a follow-up item, but based on all of the hoo-ha that's going on here, we don't need to collect it. So for instance, going back to the tire scenario, right? The first question is the tire pressure okay? Yes or no? The second follow-up is, if you say no, why? So if I say yes, then we don't need to do the follow-up. So coming back to our formula here, this first part is what we do if the if statement that we started is true. So there is a follow-up and we do need to do it. If that's true, grab the follow-up item. If that's not true, then all we need to do is we just need to index out of the remaining items minus the item that we're doing, the first thing that's on the list. Literally, we're doing the exact same thing. So this formula is the exact same thing that I have right here. That's how this works. And, this big giant and statement in here, it's stuff like this where it seems really complex. It seems like it could be really overwhelming in what it's doing. But when you start going through it line by line and you follow the logic, it actually makes sense, right? Is there an item? Yes. Have we collected it? Yes. Yet? No. Is it always required? No. It's based on a value. Yeah. What kind of value? Did we do the value that we need to do? Yes. There you go. We need to follow up. Craziness, right? That is how the next item thing works here inside the system. If you want to be able to see the value of what is the next item, there is a way where you can turn on debug mode inside the app. If you go to the main menu and you go to settings, there is a yes, no for debug. And when you do that, I've made a whole bunch of fields that are hidden and that are necessary to make things work. I've made them visible inside that. So for instance, let's go to the catalog. Let's do the pre-trip inspection because this is the one that has the tire pressure thing. And I can go to the tire pressure. All right. And so now before I do anything, so you can obviously see there's a whole bunch of other stuff shown inside here. But one of them is the next item. So it's grabbing for me the first item in the list because I didn't do the vehicle ID. So if I just do that really quick and I say, I'm just going to do that. And then I save. All right. So the next thing to do is the tire pressure. So if I come inside here and it shows you the next item is sign for complete, which follows, if I go back to the remaining items, it's what it needs to be complete. But if I go inside this tire pressure one and I say no, now remember I said that this tire pressure okay has a follow-up where if I say no, it needs to be yeah. So this column here is the thing that's doing all of the work, all of the heavy lifting for what do we need to do next. There's a lot of really fun stuff that you can do with that sort of setup where I've got this column that specifies this is what I need to do next. One of the future advancements that I'm going to throw inside this app is going to be the ability to include skip logic. Meaning, so right now you've got the ability to create a follow-up item, but it's just one follow-up item. Now I could create another follow-up item where is the tire pressure okay? No. Why is it not okay? And it's a free text field for you to enter whatever. And then maybe I have another few questions that I ask you where it's like, well, is the tread okay? Is there did you put goo inside it? Did you do this? Did you do that? You know what I mean? I could make a series of follow-ups just linking one after the other. But there's another way that you could do that. There's a way where I could specify based on the value that somebody answers, go to this question. And the real fun thing that you can do is you could start creating systems to where I'm on question number 2 and they answer negative. All right. And based on that, I want to skip questions, 3 through 10 and drop them on number 11 now. All right. So by creating a system like this, where I've got the ability to specify what's the next thing that I want to do, I can create a way where I can say, all right, well, based on all of the stuff, just like I've got that giant formula that's figuring out, do we need to do the follow-up item, right? I can have another giant formula inside there that's checking some kind of skip logic thing, where it's saying, all right, based on the value that this person selected, we need to go way far forward. And then you can do things to where when I save an answer, and like I'm on question number 2 and the next thing is 11, all right? So when it drops me into the next field or the next item, number 11, I could have a system that would then recognize, well, all right, there's a master list of items that has 1 through 15. You've collected 1 and 2. You didn't collect 3 through 10. You're doing number 11. Okay, then that means you've skipped all of those things in the middle. We could create skip records for them or do something else. Anyways, there's a whole bunch of fun stuff that you can do with this. Yeah, that's just an initial little insight into how some of the nuts and bolts of how this works. I'm going to continue to do more deep dives and like follow-up videos on how all of this stuff works. For instance, this system is set up to allow you to have multiple things going on at once, where it's kind of set up similar to how the shopping cart works, right? But with the shopping cart sample app, you can only have one thing going at a time. The system doesn't know how to handle if you have 2 going at once. It doesn't know what to do. It would probably link things in the wrong way. This system is designed in such a way that you can have any number of things going on and it will still work. So like, that's something that I'm going to have to go over and talk about how it works in the future. Anyways, that's all I'm going to go in on for this little deep dive here. The next section is questions. All right, we got the live chat. I want to see if this works here. Yeah, so you see, I got this, sorry, wrong side. I got this little gray box right here. This gray box is supposed to have the YouTube chat inside it. So all of the stuff that's been said down there in the chat, that's supposed to be inside this little gray thing. Just doesn't seem to be working. Whatever. C'est la vie, man. Thanks for watching, everybody. Y'all rock. I see we got David Bolognese. What's up, buddy? And Oscar. Yeah, what's up, Oscar? So, question for later. I started freelancing. Yay! Go, Oscar. Yeah, buddy. Welcome to the fold, man. Awesome. That's good to hear. I can't wait to see where you go. That's fantastic. He has a question. How do you start the making process for your client apps? Isn't it with the table database creation? I ask because they told me why I spend too much on it, and I tried to explain 2 things. Okay. Number 1, it's probably the most important part, the heart of any AppSheet app, where most people it makes most basic sense. Yeah, I agree. Number 2, I was using my back-end maker, the one that we talked about in the community, him and I. So it was an even faster than normal process. I can't imagine doing it from scratch. That would at least take 2 hours. So again, the question is, what is your process? I guess with each app, it has different needs, and we should all start from somewhere, right? Maybe there's a base that we could start from. Okay, I'm with you. So yeah, the building your records, right? Building your database, that is largely the thing that takes most the time, at least in the beginning. Realistically, phase 3 is what takes forever, and that's how can we make it look better? How can we reduce the number of clicks? How can we bring automation in it to make it awesome? How can we add new stuff? That's phase 3, lasts forever. But out of the beginning phases, I always talk about app creation in 3 phases. Phase 1 is like the foundation phase. That's where you're building the tables, you're building out slices and virtual columns and physical columns, and you're getting the lists and all of the things that you need so that you have the data in the system in order to make it work. Phase 2 is then taking that foundation and it's like, all right, how can I go from zero? How can I go from an empty database and get to a point where we've got the ball rolling and we can kind of keep it going? Phase 2 is all about starting from nothing, getting to we've got our final answer. Doesn't matter how long it takes to get there. Doesn't matter how messy it is, that's not the point of phase 2. Phase 2 is, can I just get from nowhere, from nothing, to a point where we can keep doing what we need to do and then keep doing it. Doesn't matter how messy it is. After you get those 2 things put into place, then you move on to phase 3, which is how can we make it look better? How can we reduce the number of clicks to get from one place to another? How can we improve? That lasts forever. Out of the first 2, building the foundation and getting all the nuts and bolts in place, the foundation is really kind of the biggest one. Putting all the nuts and bolts in place is, its own thing, but like you're constantly going back to the data source and adding columns, removing columns, making new tables, removing tables out of the mix. Like, yeah, that's a thing that you're doing. And like you said, Oscar, the data source is the foundation of your app. Like, my tables are the heart and soul of how everything's working inside. That is the data. So it makes sense that that's where you're spending most of your time. For me, all right. So if I just go over like my app building process, like the way that I do when I start, like when I have a client. First thing that I'll do is I'll sit down and we'll talk and I'll come up with, like a rough idea of the data schema that I'm going to build. Like, what are the basic tables that I'm going to need? What are some of the basic ideas of the columns that I need? Like, what are the data points that they absolutely need to have? I'll come up with that and I'll usually just kind of put that in like a Google, maybe I'll do a Google sheet and just like list stuff out, or maybe I'll just start building the tables. Nowadays, I just start building the tables. Or I'll get like a Google Doc, and make like a document that has everything kind of outlined on it. After a while, I actually created a quoting app that allows you to put all of this sort of stuff in there, and then it will do what it's supposed to do. It produces a PDF that's, a nice little thing. But anyways, yeah, starting. So I start with whenever I'm like, okay, time to start, right? So I've got this rough idea of what I want to do, of like the tables that I need to make with some of the columns that I need to do inside there. And so then I start building out my tables. Then once I get the rough idea of my tables done, and I usually do all of my tables at once. Now, I have the benefit of having done this for years, so I can, like, in my head, see the app that will result from the table that I'm building. So I can kind of, like, play with the app in my head as I'm building the table out. I'll be like, all right, so this column is going to be an enum. It'll have these 2 values. Based on that, these columns will appear, and then I'll add the columns in. I'll need a thing for a time. I'll need a thing for whatever. And, like, I just go through and I start building the app in my head, like the form that I want people to fill out as I'm building the table. Then I take that and start adding it into the app. Now I start with the standard starting template because that's got the metadata stuff on the end. It's got the header stuff at the front, and all I got to do is put the stuff in the middle. And Oscar, it's, you're using, note parameters to build your tables anyways. So yeah, okay, but here's the thing. So if you're using, okay. All right. If you're using note parameters to build your table, building the note parameters is a very time-consuming process. And to be honest, unless you, in order to handle that for myself, because I have the template tables that I put out and things, the auto tables that I put out, I realized how long it took me to do all of those. So I built an app to do all of that for me. And I made the app easy in a way to work with. So it's relatively fast for me to develop the note parameters that I need, and then it's just copy paste, call it good. And then I made a script that does that for me, and it's just hit the button and it's done. But if you're like building the things out by hand and like you're troubleshooting and then you're like adding it to the app and oh, it broke, it didn't work, well, I got to try and figure out where's the syntax problem. Like I wouldn't do that sort of stuff on the client time. Do you know what I mean? There'd be a delicate balance there because yeah, part of what you're doing is totally dedicated to this client and, but part of what you're doing is not dedicated to that client. If part of that is building the note parameters and troubleshooting the note parameters and all of that, like that's not client work. Like that's you work. You know what I mean? And whenever I fall into that situation, like I just turn my clock off when I'm working. So like I'll be working on something and then I'll be like, all right, yeah, okay, fair enough. I'm doing something for me, fair enough. I'll go over there and like I'll backdate a clock out. I'll be like, all right, I've been doing this for like 20 minutes. So I'll clock out 20 minutes ago. Because I'm not going to charge my client for me working on, my personal stuff. I mean, yeah, I'm doing it for them, but you get where I'm going with this. Like, for me, I only bill people things when what I'm doing is like theirs. It's dedicated to them. And I'm not going to use it for anything else. If I'm going to use it for something else, I'll probably turn the clock off. Because at that point, it's more like I'm going to share it on YouTube, so it doesn't make sense for this person to pay for it. And so, if that was what was going on, where there was a lot of time, and they're like, "Man, you got all this stuff," and okay, that might be a legitimate complaint by the client. I don't know. I see you keep going. Thanks, buddy, for welcoming comments on freelancing and your inputs on making the process. By the way, I had a meeting and I took notes that helped me create the back end, blah, blah, blah. Okay. Another anecdote, I had to rush to make an app to invoice and keep records of my work, which was a stressful day, but the app turned out great. Yeah, man. If you want a copy of the app that I use for what I do, if you're a Patreon supporter, you can just go over. I have TT IOTA. Got two versions. I got one that's the version I use, which is just like a single user, like it's just intended for me. I've got another version that's meant for multiple people to use it. But I built TT IOTA in such a way that it allows you to specify like what are the things that you're doing. I'm getting it in sample mode so I can show you what it looks like. I've built my time tracker myself in such a way that it allows for me to easily switch from one task to the next. So what am I talking about? So like I've come in here and I've specified, I have a list of all of the tasks that I do. If we view it in a table here, right? So like actions, building tables, column structure, communications, working on a template, doing UX stuff, working on workflows, doing troubleshooting, working whatever. So like all of the stuff that I do, like I have a task inside here. And then the way that I built this is like, okay, I have the ability to do like a quick log where I can just click in here and it's like, what are you starting? What are you doing? Well, I'm starting UX stuff. There you go. I'm now clocked in for doing UX stuff. And now I'm the type of person where I want analytics about what I do. I want to be able to see how long it takes me to do what I'm doing. That way later on I can better quote what I need to do. Do you see what I mean? And so this is built to the second data capture to where like right now, so I'm like clocked in doing UX work and then I can just come in here and say, what am I doing next? I'm building tables. there you go. Now I clocked out from this UX. The start time for this is the close time for this. And this has got, you see, I was on that for 30 seconds. And like, that's the whole point. And then if I wanted to adjust something, like say I wanted to, I did it a while ago, I have the ability to turn on this adjustment thing and say, yeah, I did it 55 minutes ago, right? And then that 55 is added to whatever the current time is or subtracted from so that it backdates, or I could just modify it here. Anyways, the point being, this TT-IOTA thing is really helped me understand what I got going on. And it's all about creating an ongoing time log, right? So instead of creating a time log and then like clocking that out and then creating another one, the idea is each log is the next task in the chain. And so I clock in one time, and then when I say I'm switching a task, that closes the old one. And so it's just a cascade, one after the other, after the other, after the other, after the other. And then when I want to stop, I just create a stop record. You don't see it here because I hide the stop records out of the list. You don't need to see them. It's just a stop record. But you can see it here on this last log. The task is literally stop. So like, and if I come in here, I can actually turn this on so that you can see all the stop records. But anyways, that's what I did in order for me to make my time tracker. I made my list of the various different tasks that I do. And I even went as far as to connect those in series, because it's like, all right, the first thing I do is I build tables. Then I integrate that into AppSheet. Then I do view stuff. Then I do actions. Then I do automation. Like I always go in that chain. So I just chained them together in that way to where when I start doing one, the system recognizes, oh, there's a chain on this one. And then when I go into the time log form, it presents me with a button that says next, so that I can just be like, yeah, I'm doing the next thing. Like I don't even have to worry about selecting the right task or whatever I'm doing. I'm just like, yep, doing the next thing, moving on. And then the other thing I've done is I've made that to where you can add notes to that. Super easy. And I'll tell you what, being able to add a note to a time log where like I'm saying I'm working on building a table, but then I can be like, I'm building this table, specifically working on that. And like, it takes me 2, 3, 5 seconds to type that into the note field. But then like later on, when I completely forget what I'm doing, or I got distracted because, my house is on fire or whatever, I can come back and now I have a note that tells me exactly what I was doing. And if I do notes like that throughout all my time logs, I can have a for real understanding of what's going on inside of things. And did you get what I'm going with that? Good stuff, man. Good stuff. Let's see. Anything else here from Oscar? I'm going to hop off here if nobody else has any more burning questions. Let's see. He was making the app. Also, no parameters are made using the backend maker, so it doesn't take very long. Good way to go. Thanks, man. Yeah, that time tracker thing, the TT-IOTA is the evolution of everything that happened since the beginning of when I started working on stuff. There's a lot inside there. Like I've got one of the things that I don't even really use anymore, but it's still in there and it's still working is so for each day that you clock in, the system actually keeps track of how many different sessions do you have for that day. Like I clock in and I clock in from 8 to 10, and then I go on lunch from 10 to noon, and then I clock in from noon to 5. Okay, well, from noon to 5, that's session number 2. Or maybe I'm out and in, and you got 5 sessions this day. It actually keeps track of all the sessions like that. And the method that it does in order to make that work is pretty crazy. The fun thing about this app, the reason why I haven't really rebuilt it yet, I kind of like it like this, is the app is really old. Like this app is literally the app that I started building back in 2015 when I started doing what I'm doing. Like I needed a way to keep track of all of this stuff. This is that app, and I've just evolved it over time, which means it was built before automation. It was built before actions were a thing. Like, let that sink in. This app was built before actions. Like, there was no action. There was no buttons that you could press to do anything. It wasn't a thing. Couldn't do it. So I had to do other things in order to make a whole bunch of stuff work. So the app is full of a whole bunch of really old stuff, a whole bunch of workarounds, and it's like, wow. When you see how things used to be done, it's crazy. Like, it's nuts what's going on inside some of these things. But anyways, that's that. That's all I got. All right, let's go back to here. All right, that's all I got. That's everything for this time. I do appreciate you guys showing up. I really do appreciate it. If you like what I do, subscribe, do all that stuff. You want to check out TT-IOTA, the thing I've been talking about, go ahead on over to patreon.com/MultiTech. It's $10 a month. Not only do I have that sample app, there's a couple versions that are really crazy, but I've also got a private Google folder full of a bunch of goodies. There's some template tables inside there that are hyper specific with a whole bunch of guides on how to do things. I got some walkthroughs of how to do some really advanced things inside your app that are like 50-step processes. And I'm always improving and advancing. It's my goal to make this the best thing that I can for you guys. Anyways, that's all I got. Thanks for joining. Enjoy your weekend. Get a lot of work done. Get outside and enjoy the fall time if you can. See you in the community, everybody. Peace.